From the AP, Supreme Court questions obstruction charges brought against January 6 rioters and Trump. This is great. We have this clip, and Wokeness posted it. Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch nukes Joe Biden's DOJ over January 6 sentences. Gorsuch lists multiple cases of folks who obstructed a congressional proceeding without receiving a 20-year sentence. Let's play the clip real quick. It's about 2 minutes long.
If I might, so what does that mean for the breadth of this statute? Would a sit-in that disrupts a trial or access to a federal courthouse qualify? Would a heckler in today's audience qualify, or at the State of the Union address? Would pulling a fire alarm before a vote qualify for 20 years in federal prison?
There are multiple elements of the statute that I think might not be satisfied by those hypotheticals, and it relates to the point I was going to make to the Chief Justice about the breadth of this statute. The kind of built-in limitations are the things that I think would potentially suggest that many of those things wouldn't be something the government could charge or prove as 1512c2 beyond a reasonable doubt, would include the fact that the actus reus does require obstruction, which we understand to be a meaningful interference. So that means that if you have some minor disruption or delay or some minimal outburst, we don't think it falls within the actus reus to begin with. My outbursts require
the court to reconvene after the proceeding has been brought back into line, or the pulling of the fire alarm, the vote has to be rescheduled, or the protest outside of a courthouse makes it inaccessible for a period of time. Are those all federal felonies subject to 20 years in prison?
So with some of them, it would be necessary to show nexus. So with respect to the protest outside the courthouse, we'd have to show that, yes, they were aiming at the proceeding.
Yeah, they were trying to stop the proceeding.
Yes, and then we'd also have to be able to prove that they acted corruptly, and this sets a stringent mens rea. It's not even just the mere intent to obstruct. We have to show that also, but we have to show that they had corrupt intent in acting in that way.
We went around that tree yesterday.
I know. I heard the argument yesterday, but
you know, I feel bad for this Elizabeth Preligar, because she has to argue what is the stupidest position imaginable, because it makes literally no sense. But she has to. It's her job. So she's trying. Bless her heart, she's trying. But then we have to prove it was done corruptly. They knew what they were doing is wrong. She is... what's surprising to me is this would end leftist political organizing overnight. And so I'm of the mind, I'm like, oh, I actually want her to win this one. If she wins this, that means anytime Antifa protests in the street, anytime they show up and bang on a door of the building, 20 years in prison. Now, I really don't think that's good for this country. We do need free speech. But her argument is, if they have to prove you knowingly that you were intending to obstruct and that there was wrongdoing in it. Okay, well, these leftist organizations have direct action meetings where they get together and they explain why you will be arrested because what you're doing is wrong. In which case, her argument is meaningless. I really do think, based on this, we're going to see the Supreme Court come out on the side of the J6ers. Many of the J6ers will likely have their charges dropped pertaining to obstruction. Jacob Chansley is a good example. How could this man have known what he was doing is wrong if the police escorted him through the building? To which he then said, thank you, officers, for allowing us in the building.
And from what I've heard from this day in court, they're citing his social media posts, right? They're saying he said this, that, and the other, that we should, stop the vote, do whatever. But I feel like that all comes to an end when you get there and the police are like, come on in. Like, then you're not disrupting anything. The police are letting you in. No matter what your intention was coming to D.C., the second you get there and police say, it's cool if you come in, then you're just going in because the police said it was okay.
Her standard is meaningless.
Right.
Corruptly. And what does that mean? She says it means wrongfully. But what? What does that mean? When Gorsuch asks her, these protesters are intending to block the vote and shut it down. And she goes, yeah, but they may think they have a First Amendment right to do so. So because they think they have a right to do it, it's legal? That's a bold statement. I guarantee you, each and every one of those J6ers were screaming First Amendment, right to a redress of grievances, believing they had a right to go into a public building and contest the vote. So it's an interpretation of her. The government is basically arguing to the government, mind you, which is hilarious, that They get to decide when they think you did something wrong. That's it. Have a nice day.
Yeah, the government's arguing to itself about something that happened to it. It's very weird.
What's crazy is, you guys grew up, I think you grew up in the 90s, 2000s, right? It's like,
90s.
we never saw any of this stuff. Now it's like lawfare is warfare. It's like, this is just the new version of war. We had war in Iraq. We had this kind of war. Now it's like on the homeland, but instead of domestic terrorism, it's like this lawfare. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I see, people like this Preligar, this Engaran, this Mershan. I mean, these are what I would describe as authoritarian, dangerous, malicious, and evil individuals. I wouldn't have said that, when I was a teenager. I would say that those I believe it's fairly naive. But there's no such thing as good and evil. There's competing interests. But actually, I don't think it was so naive. I think it was just the state of politics in the 2000s and before. Democrats and Republicans would hang out with each other. Conservatives and liberals and family members would argue, but they'd get along and buy each other's presents. Now it's, if you're a Trump supporter, you go to prison for the rest of your life. If you're a far leftist who firebombed a building, we'll let you pass. We're at the point now where the polarization is so extreme. She's literally arguing to the government they have a right to imprison whoever they think did something wrong. Whether her argument is literally, if we don't like you, we lock you up. Have a nice day. That's it. The far left can shut down official proceedings. Bowman can pull the emergency signs off the door and pull the fire alarm and nothing. And you could bumble into a building with no barricades. The doors were opened by police. You can take a selfie with the cops who will smile. You can say, thank you, officer, for allowing me in.
I think you're right. The right knows how to use power. Or excuse me, the left knows how to use power. The right does not use power.
Refuses
when we
to.
get power, what do? And I'm saying, as a conservative, if you get power, what do? You just, like you're saying, you bow over and you take this. The left, they get in there and what do? They prosecute the hell out of everyone. When are these AGs in any of these states going to stand up and prosecute as well? I don't think it's going to stop until then.
It's the craziest thing to me. I mean, I've met prosecutors and then I ask them, when are you going to charge Biden? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you got a local DA in New York charging the former president, Trump? And it's clearly bunk. You're not going to try anything, literally nothing against Biden or anybody else. Fair point in that Biden is deeply unpopular. And so perhaps the strategy really is exactly what we're seeing. Republicans say, no, let them do it. Let them do it. They're going to lose because of it.
You don't think Trump actually wants it, though, do you? All these charges against him and whatnot.
No, I think Trump would like to go to his son's graduation. But I also think that sooner or later, my fear is there is no alternative scenario no alternative circumstance other than Republicans start acting, conservatives, not so much Republicans, start acting like Antifa, in that they no longer believe the government exists. I think what we're seeing right now especially with Elizabeth Preligar's argument that, the J6ers knew what they were doing is wrong, so we can lock them up, but the far leftists who firebombed buildings aren't being charged with this. I mean, that's insane.
We could never figure out their intent. We have no idea what they were thinking.
I mean, it's a bit hyperbolic to be fair. They did arrest some of those people. But when it comes to, pulling a fire alarm, for instance, Bowman should have been immediately charged. No question. He took the emergency sign off the door and then pulled the fire alarm and took off. He didn't even try going through the door. His excuse made no sense. They are outright saying they're a cabal. They will go after the enemies of their mafia, and that's it. At a certain point, the right just says, there is no government, there's just a mafia. The left realized this a long time ago, and now they are fighting with them physically in various parts of the country, and they have allies who are. I think you got two things with the government: an unwillingness to go after the left because they can't win, and willingness to work with them to a certain degree to try and earn their favor. It's like when in D.C. there was an anti-censorship protest by the right. Antifa showed up and attacked these guys. That benefits the establishment and the deep state. So they're like, okay, the enemy of my enemy. We're gonna let the left keep wreaking havoc on Trump supporters and people who oppose our plans. Sooner or later, people on the right are going to say, especially now with the charges against Trump that are baseless, there is no underlying crime. They're just going to say, this is not even a legal system. It's quite literally just dudes with guns telling you to get on your knees. At a certain point, I guess I can put it this way. I make the joke about clowns, fine. But let's just say a guy in a black hoodie and a mask shows up to your house with his buddies, and they say, get out of your house, get on your knees. We're tying you up. We're putting you in the van. What does any security consultant tell you? Never go to the second location. That's what they say. When you're faced with kidnap, the number one thing they tell you is you must do everything in your power to stop them from being able to take you to the second location, because that's when you die. You have a chance to actually resist before that happens. Now, don't take my word for it. Talk to actual security consultants on that one. But what I see now with this case against Trump, these are people who do not have any legitimate legal grounds to arrest, detain, or even try Donald Trump. Even on CNN, there was a judge saying that the judge should be recused over what his daughter's been doing. It was apparently Caitlin Collins was talking to him.
Yeah, how is that not relevant?
All of it's relevant, and I think we're going to get to the point where people just, look, imagine a guy showed up to your house with a badge that said the National Development Control Facility of Excellence and Prestige, and he claimed he was the emperor of the region, and you were his. The question is,
tell him to get the hell out of there.
You would, right? Yeah. And so this is what I think we're going to end up seeing now with everything they're doing. They've pushed so far. They're not operating within legal means anymore.
Even the NYPD who would execute it is sitting there and loving Trump. It's pretty crazy, the fact that they'd have to arrest him.
They would do it in 2 seconds.
And they would do it anyway, exactly. Yeah. I think it's pretty optimistic to imagine a point where conservatives basically have a delegitimate view of the government. I don't really see that happening. I mean, isn't conserving something as important as government, or something that conservatives perceive as being as important as government? And liberals too, I guess. Isn't that something that they can't ever really let go of completely?
No, it in a certain sense, if a judge signed off on a warrant and they showed up to your house and said, look, I'm just doing my job, I got a warrant, conservatives would say, well, okay, officer, I respect what you're doing. But when the cop shows up to your house and says, we don't have a warrant, we don't need a warrant, there's no charges against you, you're going to get on your knees right now, or else people are going to be like, okay, this is a shakedown. Sooner or later, it breaks. We've seen it a little bit when conservatives are stomping on the thin blue line flags, because up in the Pacific Northwest, the cops were abusing the right and letting Antifa wreak havoc. Sooner or later, I think this lady has exposed the government massively, and I don't know if maybe we'll never see the ramifications of this. Maybe the right will always just get on their knees and say, thank you, sir, may I have another? I don't know.
Well, if Trump defied the judge's orders and he did actually go to the SCOTUS hearing, or if he went to his son's graduation, that might be a moment where everybody would flip. If they saw him do it, I think that they might.
And I think the issue is Trump maybe thinking, cold block in New York jail does not sound comfortable.
Yeah.
I think we did see a signal from the Supreme Court today that they are aware that the judicial system is essentially operating with a political bias. I mean, so one of the articles that we have up on Scanner right now is on Idaho, the court ruling that Idaho can continue to enforce its restrictions on gender intervention, like medical, whatever else. And the case was originally brought by families of two minors who said, well, if you ban their access to hormones, they'll suffer a mental stress, mental issue. And a court ruled in their favor. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, what the case came down to was this idea that the court had issued a universal injunction. They had said, because these people brought a complaint against this part of the law, all of the law can't be enforced. And the state said, well, if we let these people, we make an exception, these minors can get their hormones, can we enforce the ban on surgeries? And the court, the headlines will tell you this is about LGBTQ transgender policy for minors, but really it comes down to this idea that the court acknowledged that more and more lower courts are issuing these universal injunctions as a way to stop laws that people don't like. And again, that's not really how this is supposed to work. But there are activist groups who use, like you said, lawfare as warfare, and are able to say, well, if we sue and we get a sympathetic judge, they'll stop this in its tracks, and that reverses anything that's done by the legislature. So we do know that the Supreme Court is starting to signal, like, one of the lines in it is like, as these universal injunction cases become more and more common, we'll get more of these high-profile cases challenging the law.
Great point.
And I just think it's interesting that, there are a lot of issues, but I don't know that conservatives will ever say, like, we're anti-government, right? But they might start to say the way our government operates right now is broken and we cannot treat it like a functional, healthy government.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.